So recently, while on a live stream, I had a discussion with one of you, Gabe, about how the covers on the channel, the acoustic covers, kind of sounded different from what one could expect from acoustic covers in general.
So my answer at the time was that I record for acoustic instruments. My setup is geared towards acoustic, but then I edit and arrange like I would a rock track. And after that, I do all the EQ, all the mastering, all that kind of stuff like I would an EDM track. And I think that's what gives the covers on this channel, among other things, their unique signature.
But after the stream, I started reflecting on the music I've put on this channel, the covers I've put on this channel over the past, well, over 10 years now, and how incredibly lucky to have that sort of unique signature. I feel that I've found my sound.
In fact, I'd wager that if somebody heard a new cover from me blindfolded for the first time and they were familiar enough with the channel, they'd probably recognize it as one of mine. And that's an incredibly fortunate position to be in as a musician.
Because, and I think a lot of musicians will agree with me, but a lot of us spend so much time trying to find that unique approach that defines their music, that sound that defines them as an artist. Some find it either by hard work, research, luck, or by the sheer limitation of their stylistic boundaries, or just being the first one onto a new scene or a new genre. Sometimes it's kind of all of the above. Before I continue, I want to say that there's nothing wrong with sounding like everyone else. If you want to be an artist that leans into a genre or that can be commissioned for any style of music, then being derivative is one of the skills you need to have. I've often engaged in style studies just for my own curiosity, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a very fun exercise. But this video is about finding your voice and being unique.
Use different tools than everyone else.
The recurring questions I get on the channel is what DAW, what digital audio workstation I use for my covers.
Ableton. I use Ableton, a DAW that is primarily used for electronic music to record acoustic covers. Why? Because it is primarily not designed to record acoustic covers.
Now, don't get me wrong, most DAWs will allow you to record any style of music you want, really. It's just about doing something with a tool that is not really designed for it. Some DAWs will have workflow changes that will orient your choices when it comes to arranging or processing sounds or editing or mastering, and sometimes that can make the difference in your overall sound and choices to your music. So yeah, I went with Ableton, a tool that is the least obvious choice for what I do. If you want to sound like everybody else, then use the same tool everybody else uses. Plugins are a good example of that. Whenever a new plugin comes in, you can pretty much be guaranteed that every musician or producer is going to use them for their productions in the next 6 months. So I tend to stay away from new plugins, at least for a while.
Now the point here is that so much hype is made on new tech, new VSTs, new instruments, that indulging that FOMO itch is a sure way to blend into the massive productions, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid here.
Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that new hardware, new plugins, new VSTs is bad per se, but maybe that shimmering, sparkly new reverb that everybody uses on pads might be more interesting to you on plucky sounds. Use instruments out of their historical context. I once heard Tom Morello in an interview say that his style of guitar playing came from a complete disregard for the tradition of the guitar. Something like that, I'm paraphrasing, but the point is that no instrument deep down is really tied to any genre of music. Now, the banjo is typically associated with country music in the US, or in my case, the tenor banjo with traditional Irish music. And it's fair to say I've used the banjo and the mandolin quite a bit on my covers over the years, but usually bar a few examples where I specifically made traditional music,
none of them use the typical tropes you'd associate with those instruments.
There are absolutely no rules that forbid you from using any instruments outside their cultural or historical or stylistic boundaries. If you want to use a bass for lead, you can absolutely do that. Some have. If you want to use a violin with a plectrum and use that for chords, there's no rules that forbid you from using the violin in that way. It's really up to you.
Allow yourself time to experiment. I like to set aside a day or two a month to experiment with new stuff or ideas. Whenever an idea pops up in my head, I make a note of it, and then once a month I'll sit down for an evening and go over all the ideas I've noted for that month. So what ideas am I talking about? Well, it can be anything really. One of the ideas I've had many years ago was to classically orchestrate my chords, my background chords, but not using a violin, viola and cello. Instead, I'm using single notes on a whistle, the accordion and the bass recorder or the bagpipes. But it can be very simple stuff, just play a single note on the guitar with the bow, double it, pan it hard right and hard left, send it through a chorus, send it to a long shimmering reverb, sample that and run it through a sampler and play it with your keyboard and make a new instrument out of it.
Now, most of these ideas would lead absolutely nowhere, but one of them might bring your music to that new space or trigger that interest into a new area that will lead your music to that unique space. But I can guarantee two things. One is that it'll be tremendously fun, and the other one is that it will make you a lot more comfortable with failure.
Fail a lot and often. Now, paraphrasing here, but there was a saying going around when I was still training judo, and it was that a black belt is somebody who's failed more than a white belt. Now, we're too often afraid of stepping outside what we already know because we're afraid we might fail. And as an artist, as a musician, as a creative person, well, being afraid of failure is probably the worst thing that can happen to you. Because over time, fear of trying new things will paralyze you creatively. It will lead to fear of even thinking about new things. So having a few dedicated days every now and then to allow yourself to fail is so extremely important.
So let yourself become comfortable with failure and experiment freely without having to worry whether it'll work or not. It's a good way to detach yourself from the end result and embrace the process of making. It's also a great way to get those little happy accidents that might lead your music into that unique space. Because how can you be creative if you're not indulging and experimenting with new ideas?
Now, there's many other things I could talk about, and I will probably do a follow-up video on this, but luck is definitely a determining factor. But I would say this about luck, and this is probably a topic that is deserving of an entire new video, but luck is only a determining factor if you've done the work upstream, if you've been consistent with your work, and if you have the experience and ability to recognize and act on it. Also, I try to be as generic as possible because if I talked about the specific things that I do, then you'd end up sounding like me and not like you. If you have any questions about any of this, throw them in the comments and we can discuss them there, or I might do a follow-up video on this. This is new territory, this format, so let me know if you enjoy it, because yeah, I've never done this before. And if you're still watching, folks, thank you very much for making it to the end. I appreciate the support, and I'll see you next time.